You may have noticed that modern electronics are pretty fragile, and none more so than your smartphone. So then, could a rugged device like the Blackview BV5800 Pro be the answer? The BV5800 Pro has a entry-level CPU and just 2GB of RAM. It does, however, run the latest version of Android, 8.1 Oreo. It has 16GB of internal memory, which is expandable with a micro SD card. The screen is 5.5 inches and 1440 by 720. There is an 8 megapixel front camera and a 13.3 megapixel rear camera. And on the rear you'll also find a fingerprint reader. The battery is a fairly sizable 5,580 mAh and the device costs just $150. Now, as it's a rugged device, it won't come as a surprise that the BV5800 Pro is a fairly bulky device. It weighs a fairly hefty 250 grams compared to the iPhone X's 174. It's also twice as thick as that phone at 0.61 inches. At first it did seem awkwardly large, but then again I am used to the fairly slim Google Pixel. The phone felt uncomfortable in my pocket, but the important thing to note there is that it did actually fit in my pocket, so it wasn't too large to be taking out with you. The device is mostly covered in rubberized plastic, with two metal plates along the side that house the physical buttons, and a plate on the back which encompasses the camera and fingerprint reader. In order to retain its IP68 waterproof rating, Blackview have added rubber flaps to the headphone jack and the USB charging point. In order to get to either of those ports, you have to open the flaps and then make sure that you shut them again. That's very important, as if they're even slightly open, it could reduce the effectiveness of its waterproofing. The phone may look like a rugged brick, but actually opening those two flaps shows that there's a relatively normal phone encased inside. The 5.5-inch screen is protected by Gorilla Glass 3, which at first sounds really exciting, until you realise that Gorilla Glass 3 was first released in 2013. In fact, Gorilla Glass products protect over 5 billion devices around the world, so it's a pretty standard feature. So the design of the BV5800 Pro is unlikely to inspire the kind of enthusiasm that people often have for Apple's iDevices. However, it isn't wholly unattractive either. One of the BV5800 Pro's most notable features is that it does actually run the latest iteration of Google's Android smartphone operating system, 8.1 Oreo. Most budget smartphones tend to run versions of Android that are a year, maybe 2 years out of date, but that's not the case here. And it isn't the only surprise. The phone comes with support for wireless and quick charging, and it has inbuilt NFC, which means that you can use contactless payment services like Google Pay. The phone also supports 2G, 3G and 4G networks, but make sure to check the bands before you purchase. There's even dual SIM support, with the SIM tray accessible on the right-hand side of the device. The tray has two slots, one for a micro SIM card, and then one that can either be a micro SIM card or a micro SD card for expandable storage. If you are considering purchasing a rugged smartphone, then performance is probably not that high up your priority list. The BV5800 Pro's $150 price tag may also make you doubt how good the performance could realistically be on a device like this. It uses an entry-level CPU and has just 2GB of RAM, which means that intensive tasks like video and photo editing and high-performance gaming are going to be a bit stuttery and probably not work quite as expected. You'd also expect the phone to perform poorly in multitasking too, but that isn't the case. And it's largely thanks to the inclusion of Android 8.1. 8.1 Oreo is Google's best attempt at sorting out the multitasking and battery life issues that have long plagued Android. This meant that the phone actually breezed through day-to-day activities like checking your email, browsing social media, and listening to music or watching Netflix. One of the phone's key strengths, though, is its 5,580 mAh battery. The huge capacity battery means that actually, depending on your usage, you may find that you can get an entire week's worth of battery out of just a single charge. To test this, we put a YouTube video on full volume and full brightness and left it playing, and the phone lasted almost 9 hours. The main selling point of the BV5800 Pro is its rugged design. The two key features here are its IP68 rating and durable outer shell. Blackview specifications claim that it is waterproof at 1.5 meters for up to 2 hours. After testing the device, there was no indication that this wasn't the case. The phone managed to survive multiple submersions and even contact with running water. After these, there was no lasting damage and no performance issues either. The only observation was that unlocked and with the display on under running water, the phone would sometimes think that you were tapping it, so it would try and open menus or swipe up apps, things like that. Dust resistance is more of a long-term issue, but we did our best to replicate it here. So we did test it by submerging it in dry dirt and soil. After a quick wipe down, the device was, as promised, completely dust-free. When setting up the phone, I inadvertently gave it its first damage test when I dropped it onto a concrete floor. Aside from a few minor scuff marks around the corners of the casing, the device was pretty much fine. Now contrast this to the Google Pixel, which I dropped onto the same floor from about 20 centimeters by mistake, which completely shattered the screen. So knowing that it could survive these kind of day-to-day accidents, I decided it was time for more challenging tests. So I went up to the first floor, which is about 5 meters off the ground, and dropped the phone onto the same concrete surface. Now unfortunately, this led to the premature end of all the damage testing. The phone landed on its upper right-hand corner and the impact sent spider cracks all along the screen, so that it ended up looking like this. This shouldn't necessarily count against the BV5800 Pro. The corner of any device is naturally its weakest point, and as it did land directly on the corner, the impact was all concentrated there. If the phone had landed on its back or its front, then the outcome likely would have been quite different. The important thing to note from this test is that the phone did actually still work. So just testing it out after the screen is smashed, the video quality seems to be almost non-existent, but we'll have to wait and see if the mic still works. The screen was cracked, which means you would need to replace it, but functionally everything else was the same. However, as most screen repairs tend to cost upwards of $100, you may not find this economical to do on a device that costs just $150. So now we come to the all-important question. Should you buy the Blackview BV5800 Pro? Look, rugged devices aren't for everyone. They trade modern design for practicality and function. For the most part, they are niche devices made for those of us that are at a higher risk of damaging our devices. The BV5800 Pro, however, makes a convincing argument that these phones could be mainstream. The somewhat mediocre internal specifications aside, the phone actually ticks almost every desirable box. The phone supports 4G and dual SIM cards, alongside quick charging and wireless charging. There is a 13.3 megapixel camera and fingerprint reader on the rear of the device. It runs the latest version of Android and isn't crammed full of bloatware. The gigantic 5,580 mAh battery means that the phone will last for days on a single charge. It's even waterproof and dust resistant. To get all of that for just $150 is, frankly, incredible. If you like this review, give it a thumbs up below, and if not, then go down into the comments and discuss. And make sure to subscribe to make use of for tutorials and twice weekly giveaways. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.